tuning in. Today I'm working on a pair of clocks. I've actually got a big order of 50 clocks that I'm trying to get finished. So I thought I would let you guys sit in while I make a couple of them. These are 10-inch round, 1/4-inch thick MDF circles. So pretty basic. I painted the top and the edges with just a white acrylic paint just to have a nice base. And then the back, I just taped. You can also use latex. If you've seen some of my earlier tutorials, I have put latex on the backs of items to help with the drips. And I actually prefer to use latex on curved or round surfaces rather than tape. But the reason I went with a tape on these is because the latex is really hard to peel off of MDF. You have to paint the MDF first. And since I want the back to be nice and finished, I'm gonna paint it after I'm all done. And I didn't want to paint it twice. It just seemed like a waste of time. So I thought I would do the tape because it comes off of the MDF real easily. You'll have to excuse my voice. I'm just getting over COVID actually. So I'm a little bit froggy, but and I've got these up on some little cups just to get them off of the table. So that is the rounds that I'm pouring on. I've mixed up 8 ounces of resin and I've divided it up. I have 4 ounces, a little under 4 ounces, and then I have a tiny little bit in this cup. This isn't even a 1/2 ounce in here. So it's basically 4 and then just a tiny bit. So I am doing these clocks in white, and then they're gonna have a decal applied that I'll be cutting out of my Cricut, and then a clear coat after that. You could do this in any colors, any color combination that you wanna do. You don't have to put the decal on it. You could hand paint it, whatever you wanna do. There's all kinds of different, ways to create your clocks. The design that I'm going to pour on here is kind of like a marble look. So if you're interested in learning how to make kind of that marbly look, then this is definitely the right video for you. So what I'm using for the colorants today, so I'm using the Mixall white, and you see me use this in a lot of videos. This is one of my favorite whites. I get this from Bear Woods, and I'll put my coupon code at the end of the video. If you want to shop at Bear Woods, you can use my coupon code for a discount. But I'm using this white, and then I am using, I cut this bag. It's the Luster White. This is a mica powder from US Art Supply. So I'm using this Luster White mica. And then I am using Marbler's mica, and this is in Luna Pearl. This is actually more of like a glitter. It's not really white unless you use a ton of it, but it is a beautiful glittery, silvery white glitter. I love it. It is mica, but it looks like glitter. So in my cups, the cup that has the full 4 ounces, I'm gonna use the Mixall. And I'm gonna put 25 drops in here. And I like to spread my drops out like that instead of just all in one place, because this white is real heavy and it will sink. And the more drops in one place, the faster it sinks, and then it ends up sticking to my stick, and I just find it harder to mix. That's just me, but I like to spread my drops out when I put drops into resin. Just gonna mix this up. Now the trick to getting this marbly look is having 2 different types of pigment. So you'll notice I'm using the Mixall as one pigment, and then the other one is a mica. So you would want to use, for your first pigment, something that's not shiny. So this white is not shiny, it's just a basic white. You could use acrylic paint. You could use a pigment paste that's not a shimmer. There are matte micas or matte powder pigments you could use for this. Even a resin tint, as long as you can get it to be opaque. You do need these colors to all be opaque to cover up the wood. And even with the wood painted white, it's a very thin design. So you have to make sure that you've got opaque colors, because otherwise you are gonna see the wood through it, especially on the edges. So you need, like I said, one pigment that is not shimmery. So that's what this white is. And then you need a shimmery one. And so I'm using mica powder. You could use a pigment paste that's got a shimmer to it. Most pigment pastes are actually made with mica powder. So they make a good option for this, for the second color. And I like to do two colors that are the same. You notice I'm using a white pigment, the white Mixol, and a white mica. I like to use two that are the same because it gives it kind of just that dimensional look, but you could absolutely use different colors. There's no rule that says you can't. Just be aware that the colors may blend a little bit where they touch, especially if you use a lot of your heat gun. If you use that a lot to blow it around, they will blend. So you do want to pick two colors that will look good together when they blend. And you can get some really interesting effects by doing that. So using two different colors versus two colors that are the same. This is definitely a more subtle look, but I think it's really pretty. It does look, to me, it looks very much like natural stone or marble. I'm just gonna give this a good stir. You guys wanna make sure you stir your mica up sufficiently. Mica tends to take a little bit longer to mix in versus a wet pigment. Excuse me. It's definitely been an interesting holiday. Christmas and New Year's are just in the rear view. And my boyfriend came down with COVID on New Year's Day. He started feeling sick, and then a couple days later I started feeling sick and spent the whole week in bed and on the couch, and luckily didn't really have anything worse than just bad colds. I did have a high fever, but getting over it. We're vaccinated and we've had our boosters, so I think that's definitely helped us to get through this without any complications. So hopefully you're all healthy wherever you are and had a good New Year's and good holiday season. I'm sure people watching this years from now in July will be like, what? Irrelevant. But that is the state of life right now. All right, so that looks pretty well mixed. And then I'm just gonna add this Marbler's mica. Get a little stick. So this Marbler's mica is super, super lightweight. You have to mix it really carefully because otherwise it just flies everywhere. So I mix it real slow until it's all under the resin. So I'll let you get a close-up of this so you can just see how beautiful that shimmer is. Like I said, it almost looks like glitter, but it's very fine, and it is mica. Okay. So now to start the pour, I always start with my non-shimmer pigment first. Get these guys out of my way. I'm just gonna hit it with the heat gun real quick. So I have, like I said, I have 4 ounces of the white, so I'm gonna do half on one and half on the other. If you're just making one clock, you would only use 2 ounces of each color, so a total of 4. Just getting every last bit out of the cup. I hate to waste resin. And I'm just gonna wipe the stick off about halfway. And then I'm going to spread this out. So it's, let's get these out of my way. It's kind of hard. I have everything shifted up so it can be in the camera. And it ends up being in my way then. Okay, so this is almost like frosting a cake. So I just spread it across the wood. And I'm not worried about covering the edges right now. I'm just getting it up to the edge. It'll spill over when I go and hit it with the heat gun. But for right now, I just want to cover the entire surface in just a nice layer. And I'll do the same on this one. So I've done these clocks in, I do a lot in this white combination. I also do a silver combo. I do a blue. I've done red. I did some that were black with almost like a lilac mica. It was so pretty. So yeah, these are really fun to make. All right, I'm just gonna hit this with the heat gun. Just to pop some bubbles and then just kind of help the resin thin out a little so it spreads on its own. Now the next step is to pour the mica. So you can use less mica. Now I'm using 2 ounces. Or well, 2 ounces per clock. And it gives quite a bit of heavy coverage. I would encourage you to experiment with different amounts of mica and see if you want less. If you use less, then more of this background color will show through. And if you use more, eventually the mica will just take over and you'll see very little of the background. So just experiment with the combinations and the ratios and the colors and just have fun with this design. So I just kind of pour this pretty randomly on here. I don't want it to look like a shape. When I did my first few, I was subconscious. I wasn't even really paying attention, but I actually poured in a star pattern. So then I started noticing all my clocks looked like they had mica. They were like marble stone, but they had like this very subtle star pattern. I don't know if anyone noticed it, if it was just me that noticed it, but I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. And so I try to pour randomly now. But you do want to leave areas where the background color is showing through. And you'll see once I start hitting this with the heat gun, and it moves around, the mica will cover most of it up, but not all of it. And you do want to leave space for that background color to show, because it's the difference between the flat white and the shiny mica that really creates some of this dramatic effect. All right, so now this part, this is the key to the whole thing, I think, is the heat gun. And I'm gonna try to talk while I'm blowing, so hopefully you can hear me. But I do a first pass over both clocks just to get the bubbles out and start warming it up. And I do a second pass, and I'm moving it pretty quickly. I'm not letting it dwell in any one spot. I'm not really blowing the resin around. You can see it's not really moving, just the bubbles are popping. But it is thinning. And I know it's thinning because it's starting to roll off the sides in some areas. So now that it's warm, now I'm going to purposely start blowing it. So now I blow, and I'm doing two things here. I'm trying to break up the mica, but I don't want to get rid of the white, the background white. So I'm spreading the mica, but I'm being very careful to leave that background white there too. And the second thing I'm doing is I'm blowing it over the edges. Get this one warmed back up. So I'm not blowing in a direction, I'm blowing straight down. I'm not tilting the heat gun and trying to blow the resin in any particular direction. Just blow straight down. Okay. Now, the next step is this glittery mica. You can use real glitter, but if you're going to use real glitter, at least the glitters that I have tend to sink. So you'll put them on here and they'll end up sinking and you really won't see them very much. So you want to test out your glitter and find out if it's a resin that floats or sinks. Glitter. Find out if your glitter floats or sinks. I have a lot of heavy glitters and they sink. And you don't want that to happen. You want them to float because you want to be able to see them. This particular mica floats, so it stays on top of the design. So then what I do is I look at each pattern that has developed and I look for edges between the mica and the white background. And I just drizzle this along that edge. That's just how I do it. You can do it however you want, whatever design makes you happy. And I try to make it look random as much as possible because, you know, I'm trying to mimic a natural material, marble. And I don't really worry too much if the streams are thin or thick. I'm just letting this mica kind of do its own thing and come off of the stick however it feels like it. Now, if you do find that you have a mica or a glitter that sinks, you can still use it. You just have to let your base thicken up a little bit. Let everything thicken up before you put the glitter on. Let's wipe off my stick here. All right, so I'm just gonna do one more pass. Now, I am not trying to blow this around now. What I'm doing with it this time is just popping bubbles. You could blow it around some more. I don't like to because I like the pattern that I have. I don't want to change it. But I'm just going to pop some bubbles. And then I'm going to do a hair check or a dust check. And then I will let these cure. And I always wait 48 hours before I put the decal on because I have had some instances where the transfer tape gets stuck to the resin because the resin isn't 100% cured and the resin is just the tiniest bit sticky. Like normally if you touched it with your fingers you wouldn't think it's sticky at all, but the tape being sticky tends to stick more to it and then it leaves a residue on the clock that I have to scrub off. So if I just wait 24 hours, I have that problem. So I wait 48 hours before I put the decal on. So the decal will be the next step. So I will see you in 48 hours when these are all cured. Okay, so actually the last step here is to check the edges. because you blew the resin over the edges, but they don't always, it doesn't always give you full coverage. So I just take a popsicle stick and I hold it horizontally. I don't hold it up and down. I hold it on like, it's not completely flat, but as flat as I can get it. And I go under and I go around. And what that does is it's doing two things. It's getting the drips off the bottom, which you're still gonna have drips, but it gives you less drips to remove later. But it also gets resin on the stick. So then when you get to a spot like right here, you can't see it, but I can, where the edge is not covered in resin because it didn't blow over the side, you've got resin on the stick. And then I just scrape it on the side. I don't try and pull resin off the top. I just use the resin that has flowed over. So if I need to, I'll pick some up off the table and just kind of dab it on or slide it on. I'm trying to not disturb the design on top. And if you forget this step and you pull out your clocks the next day and you see an edge that doesn't have resin on it, you can always take a little bit of paint and paint it in. It is just the edge of the clock, so it's not something that's going to be really visible and people aren't going to be looking at it. But I do like to make sure they're covered. Okay, so now that's done. Now I will see you in 48 hours. Okay, they are all set up and ready for the next layer. So one thing that I like to do is sometimes I will actually save the drips that come off of them. They're kind of fun. You can use them for other projects. And when you are creating with this combination of like a solid color and a shimmer, when it drips off, you get some really interesting effects. I have a ton of white drips saved, so I'm not going to save all of these, but just a little side note, I have whole bags full of drips that I'm hoping to use in a project. I'm going to do a mosaic with them someday. Okay, so the next step now is to put the decals on here for the clocks. So I have created this little template. I made this on my Cricut. This is a 10-inch round, so I created a 10-inch circle in the Cricut, a little circle in the center, and then just 2 vertical lines, or horizontal, however, I mean, it doesn't really matter. But they line up with the numbers on my decal, the 12 and the 6. So I just set this template on the clock, and then I use a metallic pen. This is, it's water-based, so it comes off. Now you do want to test it because I have some colors of these metallic pens that they come off, but they leave just like the slightest little bit of residue that you can still see. So you want to make sure whichever color you're using, it comes completely off of your surface. So I'm using, it's a silver. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it. I can see it from my angle, and that's really, as long as you can see it, that's really all you need. And I try to use a color that coordinates with my design. So that's why I'm using the silver. I just put a little dot in the center, and then I draw the 2 lines. I'm just gonna do that on both of them. Oop. All right, now the next step, I have a little piece of tape here in a circle that I use. And I'm just gonna go over the surface and just pick up any dust and hair that might be on here. Because if there is even the tiniest little piece of dust that gets caught underneath your decal, it's gonna leave a bump on your decal. And while these are handmade and they are gonna have, you know, natural imperfections from the process, you cannot be perfect with this by any means. I like to try to minimize those little unexpected things. So I just go over it with the tape. All right, now for the decal. So I've already got these cut out on my Cricut. This is what they look like. And I've got it on the transfer sheet. So let me just peel it off the backing. Then I'm just gonna line up the hole. I put a hole in the center. I'm gonna line that up with the dot. And then those two lines, I line up with the 12 and the 6, my little diamonds there. So I like to lay the center down first, and then I'll let one side go, and I just kind of smooth that with my fingers, and then I'll let the other side go, and I'll help that lay down, because you don't want it to lay down unevenly. Then you want to take your little squeegee, and I first just start from the center, and I push outwards in all directions. This just helps to ensure it's laying flat. And then I'll go over it with some force. And this is to make sure it is fully adhered, because when you pull off the transfer tape, you don't want the decal coming with. And on this particular design, the hind legs on this horse tend to stick to the transfer tape. I don't know why. So I always make sure I get those extra good. All right, I'm gonna get the other one. So peeling off the transfer tape. And when you do this, you want to go kind of slow. You don't want to go too fast in case your decal sticks to the transfer tape. You don't want to tear it. So I just go slow, and I keep an eye on it, make sure it's staying stuck down as I'm peeling and no part of it's coming up. All right, when I get to the end, I'll grab it so it doesn't roll on itself and get the next one. I have a whole pile of these decals sitting over here, ready to go. All right, so then I'm gonna put this one with the tape. I started using the tape. It seems to work a lot better than trying to use like a microfiber cloth or something to dust it. That always seems to just leave dust particles behind. So I started using the tape, and it works really well. Okay. Doing the same thing, just lining everything up. And I hold it just above the surface until I like where it is, and then I'll let that center line stick down. Now this vinyl, it's made by Vivid. I'll put a link in the description. This is their chrome art vinyl. I have used other chrome vinyls, and a lot of vinyls work really good, but I will caution you, if you're doing a clock, because you're gonna have to drill a hole in here. I've used other vinyls where this top coat of resin I put on, I let it cure for like 2-3 days. When you drill a hole, the resin will separate off of this vinyl. So you'll end up with a round lifted spot. This brand of vinyl, I don't have that problem with, but I have had that problem with other vinyls. So if you're gonna be making something like this where you have to drill a hole in it through your vinyl, you wanna test it out first and make sure that your resin will actually stay stuck to your vinyl when you're drilling. So don't invest in a ton of vinyl and commit to a big project and then find out that your resin and your vinyl are not compatible. Don't ask me how I know that. But just some advice. But if you're not drilling a hole, it doesn't matter, because it's not gonna lift. Let me stick this on the next, for my next one real quick. Okay, then it's time to remove these lines. You don't want to pour your resin and have the lines there. Yeah, so you can see them. I don't know if you could see them before, but you definitely need to remove those. So I just use a dry paper towel. They usually wipe right off. And if they don't completely come off, a little bit of Windex will do it. But this is why I use a color that's very close to my design. Just in case it doesn't want to completely come off. It's not going to look ridiculously out of place. So you can see lines are gone. All right, then I take a soft cloth. This is just microfiber cloth, and I go over the entire design. So what I'm doing now is a couple things. I am making sure it's completely adhered, and I am removing any fingerprints or marks that might be on the decal, because anything that's on this decal, after you pour your resin, it's gonna stay. You're gonna see it. So I wanna make sure you get rid of, you know, if there's little fingerprints on there or any marks. So we don't have any bubbles. Occasionally when I do this, there might be a bubble. So there's like a couple of teeny tiny ones I'm not going to worry about, but occasionally there might be a bigger bubble. What I usually do if there is a big bubble, if I can't press it out, I'll take my weeding tool and I will just very gently pop the bubble and then use this cloth to lay the vinyl down and get it to stick where the bubble was. All right, so now we're ready for the top coat. So I mixed up 5 ounces of resin, so 2.5 for each one. And I'm pouring this on the same way I poured the white, that first coat of white that I did. Just trying to do about half and half. All right, I'm just gonna wipe about halfway up the stick and spreading this around, same way as I did the white. I'm just trying to get an even coverage and then just bringing it all the way to the edges. So when I poured the white, that was 2 ounces of white. This is 2.5 ounces of clear. So it is a little bit more, and you'll definitely notice that when you're spreading it. It's a little easier to spread because you have a little bit more. But I do that on purpose because I'm not adding more to this. Like when I poured the white, then I added 2 more ounces of the white with the mica. So I had a total of 4 ounces to work with. So with this top coat, I only have a total of 2.5. So that little extra half ounce makes it easier to spread. I've done it with 2 ounces and it was just a little harder to get a full, nice full coat on the top of these. So I went with 2.5, seems to work really good. Okay, now I'm gonna get this out of the way and grab my heat gun. All right, then I'm just gonna do a check for hair and dust. So the next step after this is gonna be cleaning up the back and getting those drips off. So that will be next after these cure. But I generally let them cure for 48 hours because you have to flip them over to clean off the back. And I don't like just the thought of possibly scratching or doing something to the surface if it's not 100% cured. So I will see you back in 48 hours. We'll clean up the backs and put the clock hardware on. Okay, we're all cured. Ready for the last step, which is to remove the drips from the back. So I just set it on a Lazy Susan. It makes it easier. And all you need is your heat gun. So I just do a little bit at a time. I don't try and heat up the whole thing. It's easier because it cools off by the time you get around. So just do a little bit at a time. Make sure it's good and warm. And then you just start peeling. And if any spots get stuck, it's not a big deal. I just use a little paint scraper just to get underneath it. It's hard to grab the tape with gloves on. So that was pretty simple. All that's left now, and I'm not going to show this because it's not that interesting, but I'm just going to sand the bottom. You can see there was a little bit of resin that spilled over. It's not really a big deal. I'm just going to sand it smooth. And then I am going to paint the back of the clock. Whenever you're working on wood, you want to make sure both sides are sealed because humidity will get into the wood. It's going to absorb humidity and it could cause warping. So you want to either put resin on the back or varnish or paint or something to seal the back. So that was pretty much it for this project. So I hope you enjoyed it and I will see you guys again next time. Take care.